Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 559, Marketing Sex. Monday, September 16th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Sex aids, sexual health devices, erotic entertainment, self-pleasure products. Today, they represent some of the biggest opportunities for disruption, innovation, and profit. And yet, the entire sector remains on the fringes of our awareness, shirked by investors, blocked from mainstream advertising, and avoided by a public reluctant to talk openly about sex. So tonight, we'll discuss the struggles of introducing sex products in a hostile marketplace and the vision for what the industry can become. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the winner of the 2017 XBiz Executive of the Year Award and former head of PR and consumer marketing for Doc Johnson, and now, of course, the founder of Erica Braverman PR, Ms. Erica Braverman. Hi, Erica.
Hello, hello.
Now, also with us, we have a lawyer turned entrepreneur whose company is creating products to help women get more of the intimate pleasures that they desire. The founder and CEO of Laurels, Ms. Melanie Cristol. Melanie, welcome to the program.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, next, she's an advertising legend and she's an entrepreneur disrupting the adult entertainment industry, the founder of RevShare website MakeLoveNotPorn.com, Ms. Cindy Gallop. Cindy, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here, Bob.
And finally, she's one of the founders behind the pelvic floor toning device Yarlap, head of marketing, Ms. Maryellen Reider. Maryellen, so great to have you on the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, this is a show I've wanted to do for some time because I find it completely fascinating what's going on with the adult entertainment and the sexual products or sexual aids business. It's hard to fathom, but in 2019, we still have little to no scientific understanding of orgasms. I mean, honest discussion of sexual pleasure is mocked or ignored. In the estimated $16 billion a year sex toy and $97 billion a year pornography businesses are largely dominated by products designed by and catering to men and male preferences. And at first glance, it also looks like a nightmare for investment. I mean, the profits are there, but the climate surrounding this money is one of public shame or embarrassment. So it's hard to see how people can invest in this business and make money out of it. However, you all are obviously working either directly or tangentially within this space, so you all must see a solid path forward. Cindy, would you please make the business case for me about why you believe this space is ripe for disruption and why you've chosen it for your business to be in?
Well, first of all, Bob, I did not choose it. And I suspect as we go through the lineup here, you'll find that is the case with my fellow sex tech entrepreneurs. Because like every entrepreneur, my startup was a complete accident and came out of my direct personal experience. As the saying goes, the path appears. But to answer your question about the potential of this space, I regularly quote Peter Thiel from his book 0 to 1, where he says, our contrarian question, what valuable company is nobody else building? What are people not allowed to talk about? What is forbidden or taboo? The best problems to work on are often the ones nobody else even tries to solve. Sex tech is the absolute final frontier of technology investment and business, and that is the huge opportunity for a universal air of human experience that, because, as you say, it has been so imbued with shame, embarrassment, and guilt down the centuries, it is far, far behind any other category in terms of the enormous potential for bringing all the dynamics of innovation and disruption to it, so much so that I talk about it as the next trillion-dollar category in tech. So there is everything to go for, but there is especially everything to go for through the female lens. Because the most interesting things in this area today are coming from female founders. I'm thrilled that you're reflecting that on the show tonight. We are finally owning our sexuality, finding unique ways to leverage it in business terms, because we get the enormous market that is women's needs, wants, and desires historically deemed too embarrassing, shameful, or taboo to address in business. And by the way, tap that huge primary market, you tap a huge secondary market of extremely happy men.
You know, I love the way you picture that, the way you frame that argument. There is, though, the reality that investors don't want to touch the business because of the shame, because of the reluctance to talk about sex. How does the group, I mean, anybody can answer this, how does the group deal with that with their product? I mean, you've got two objectives here. You've got the objective to launch your product, and you've got the objective to make the product acceptable in the minds and the hearts of buyers out there. I mean, Melanie, how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, so let me give you a little bit of an idea about my product. It definitely is within that taboo space, although we're really trying to show our customers and stakeholders that it doesn't necessarily have to be. So Laurels are silky latex panties designed to maximize sensations and minimize worries during oral sex. They're worn while receiving oral sex when someone is really interested in receiving pleasure, but then something extraneous is holding them back. So Laurels look like beautiful lingerie, and then they're so thin and so stretchy that you can feel all the sensations. But meanwhile, the non-porous condom grade material blocks whatever is holding you back from enjoyment. And then we're also pursuing FDA clearance so that Laurels can be used as an STI prevention product as well. So as for how I introduce this to potential investors and stakeholders, often I'll begin by saying, hey, this is not necessarily something that you expected to hear about tonight at this pitch event or at this meeting. You're not hearing about sex tech products enough, but sex tech products are truly the next frontier. We're here to change the way that people experience pleasure, to be able to have more pleasure for a wider variety of people. So I think beginning that conversation by just being very blunt and open-minded, and then also maybe adding a little bit of humor to the situation, a little bit of levity, a little bit less seriousness, so that the natural discomfort that the audience sometimes feels is a little bit alleviated. That tends to help with opening up the conversation and allowing people to see the market opportunity here, to see the medical device aspect of what we're doing, and to see how pleased our customers have been, and how it's actually having an impact on so many people.
No,
And I think
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Bob.
No, please go ahead, Erica.
I think it's really important to also address the cultural conversation when talking about making a business case for this sector. Our current political, social moment has really allowed these women-built sex tech products to have a much bigger platform than they would have had even, let's say, 2 years ago. I think it's opening new ways of talking about our sexuality for women, for brands, and for influencers. I mean, the sex positive feminism movement really has made a lot of room for us to be a part of the cultural conversation that's portrayed in a very positive light. And you'll see that if you just Google sex tech, all the positive coverage that comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Also, if I can just chip in as well,
please.
Our investors are absolutely out there. They're just very hard to find through the conventional means. Any other founder who's looking for funding can at least do their research and target. They can go, so-and-so's publicly said they want to invest in my sector, clean tech, whatever it is. So-and-so has a publicly viewable portfolio that indicates very clearly their interests aligned with what I'm doing. Right now, nobody is putting their hand up going, bring me sex tech. And sex is the one area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. The people you think would get it don't. The people you thought were total prudes do. And the one thing I've realized in 10 years of working on Make Love Not Porn is that it's all about getting to the right person. And you cannot tell from any external signs who that right person is. But if you put what you're doing out there all the time, those synaptic connections will be made that will draw those people to you. And honestly, from my perspective, it's no bad thing to have a sex tech startup whose investors are self-selecting, because as an entrepreneur, you don't need any more thoroughly depressing meetings than you absolutely have to have. And, the people who don't get it filter themselves out pretty early on.
Something that Melanie said really stuck out for me that I want to go back to before I lose it in the muddle that is my brain. But I mean, Melanie, you mentioned that you use just a touch of humor in that process. And I'm wondering if everybody else, Maryellen, maybe you can answer this. I mean, I'm wondering if the rest of the panel feels that humor helps in pitching this, or whether or not we need to be more serious. Because one of the things that I find when I was bringing up this show, talking about the fact that I was going to be doing this program, people get giggly at first and they want to laugh at it. But as soon as I started talking about the business, people sobered up and they went, wow, that's super interesting. And I'm wondering whether or not humor has been effective for everybody, or if it's certain products that help out in doing that. So Maryellen, maybe you could answer that?
Yeah, so with Yarlap, we found that through the pelvic floor, there's been a lot of research that shows that the stronger your pelvic floor is, the stronger your response to orgasm is. And so we've had a lot of positive feedback with that. And I think when it comes to something that's taboo like this is, when you are able to connect to somebody and make them feel a little less isolated with humor, they're more likely to open up and tell you what they need and what they want than if you were to come up to them and have this very sober clinical conversation. You're able to kind of open that better when you're able to use humor as kind of a tool to make them feel a little bit more comfortable in something that otherwise makes them feel alone.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Everybody else agree with that humor is a powerful tool? Erica, how about you?
Yeah, I actually noticed, like, when I was working with Doc Johnson and we started using humor and memes in our social media, that's when our reach really kind of skyrocketed. I think humor is definitely a great tool in helping people feel more comfortable talking about something taboo. So I would definitely agree with that.
Let me ask you something about the stigmas, Cindy. I mean, when we're getting into this business sector, there's two ways we can approach it. We can take on the role of ourselves being the bringer of the product and as the breaker of social mores, and the basically the opener in terms of trying to get people to accept the product. Or we can say that it needs to be done through the psychological community or the medical community, that we need to be opening up lines of discussion through those avenues so that people are more accepting of the products. Obviously, it's got to be some kind of blend of the both of them, but which is more important? Is it more important for the medical community to step up and start talking about sex in a more reasonable way with people and break down stigmas, or is this entirely on the marketers of the world?
To be frank, Bob, it's absolutely on the marketers, because it is all about how we do this, including how we engage the medical community. The single most important piece of advice that I have to give all the time to other sex tech entrepreneurs is this: take yourself out of the shadows. And what I mean by that is people working in this area unconsciously internalize, often without even realizing they're doing it, society's disapproval of what they're doing in a way that then negatively impacts their ability to do business and to do the kind of business they want to do. I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, a young woman came to me with a sex tech startup, and obviously there are plenty of these now, but back in the day, she wanted to redesign sex toys, make them cool, sell them online. So she was talking me through her startup, and she went, and the thing is, Cindy, people are really embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. So we're going to package them up like this. We're going to send them out. And I said to her, okay, hold it right there. You need to go right back to the beginning and reconcept your startup from the ground up, because you need not to say to me, people are embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. You need to say to me, we're going to make people not embarrassed to be seen buying sex toys. When you concept and design a venture around existing societal bias and prejudice, all you do is reinforce it. I refuse to bow to existing bias and prejudice. I'm out to change it. You know, that's why at Make Love Not Porn, we call ourselves the social sex revolution. The revolutionary part is not the sex, it's the social. Everything we do is natural, normalized, socialized, out there, mainstream, mass market. And the more we all do that, the more comfortable everybody else feels responding to us, including the medical community.
So it's basically going out there and being as bold as possible about the fact that we have a sex product and that we need to be proud of that fact. Is that what you're essentially saying?
It's not even as pronounced as bold. It's just going out there being completely normal. And I have to tell you that when we do that, as I'm sure my colleagues here on your podcast can testify, the floodgates open. When people realize that we are addressing this universal area of human experience in a completely natural, normal, non-judgmental, healthy, open way, boy, oh boy, do they ever embrace what we're all selling?
I think that's a good point, Cindy.
Yeah, it makes a really good point. And it kind of leads us into the next portion of our discussion, which is the fact that we may have a great product, we may be proud of that product, and we may even have an audience that's accepting of that product, but there's media biases to confront. Now, for some time on this program, we've been covering the ongoing battle between Dame Products, which is a manufacturer of sex toys for women.
We love those guys. They're fantastic.
They seem pretty amazing. I keep running into people who know them around town. And, they've had a battle between themselves and the New York MTA, or the Metropolitan Transit Authority, over the latter's unwillingness to run the former's ads. But this is just the tip of the iceberg to the challenges faced by products in the sexual health and wellness category. I mean, you're locked out of most television ads. You're locked out of most outdoor venues. When you can advertise, you're often restricted on explaining how the product works because you're going to break some kind of societal norm. Maryellen, how do you navigate this landscape and still maintain an effective marketing strategy? What's your approach to dealing with all this?
So when we started off with Yarlap, we actually ran into a few things when we tried to do social media ads. I don't know if, and I'm very sure that Erica and Melanie and Cindy have run into this as well, of trying to do that social media ads, and you get that, nope, you're inappropriate, or your contact or your content goes against our guidelines. Have you guys gotten that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, totally.
So we get that. And it's a very fine line between actually giving the people information and then making it almost fluffy, like almost, I would say, like fluffy frou-frou, rainbows and butterflies, not giving them like the actual good information that they need. Please let me, Melanie, Erica, Cindy, let me know if you guys have run into that as well. And when it comes to us, we're basically not allowed to use the word sexual wellness or anything like that. So you end up having to say, women's wellness, and let the consumer, let the woman kind of figure it out on her own. Even though that's not what we want, we're kind of given that restriction of wording and semantics, which can be a little bit bothersome. But we are wellness. Sexual pleasure is part of women's wellness, and we've kind of navigated it through that standpoint.
It's open floor. Anybody else want to chime in on their dealings with advertising that doesn't want to necessarily use them? Melanie?
I am equally, the MTA won't allow Make Love Not Porn to advertise.
The MTA has to get a life. I mean, it's incredible. The MTA regularly puts breast enhancement ads out there. They regularly run Hims ads, which are about products for male enhancement and male erection dysfunction.
Total double standard going on there. Hims and Roman have raised over $150 million each. Basically young white male founded ventures solving erectile dysfunction get tons of money from white male VCs. They give a chunk of change to the MTA, and they get to plaster the New York subway with ads that go erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, genital herpes, whereas I can't put up an ad that says join the social sex revolution.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible when you think about it, because it's just so unfair in the way that they've dealt with this. But Erica, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, obviously you worked for Doc Johnson for a number of years. I mean, I'm not even sure whether or not you attempted to do anything in the mass market, considering the fact that so much of those products tend to be, tend to be shut out of every advertising opportunity.
Yeah, we really stopped even attempting to do social ads after a while, and we pushed heavily on PR, which I think, especially for sex tech companies that are women-led, like I said before, the cultural conversation is really open to people pushing back against, for example, the MTA's double standards, like Damon Unbound. They created this incredible approved or not approved website where you have, they're showing ads that were either approved or not approved by the MTA, and you have to guess which one it is. And it's very effective. I think, even though there are double standards, I think there's a lot of space to push back against those, in the press and in the public, and come out kind of in a very positive light.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree that campaign has been really, really strong. Another thing, though, that I've been disappointed about lately, there used to be a workaround on Facebook for companies like ours to be able to point out a piece of PR that we've received and use that as a Facebook ad. Laurel's was featured in Fast Company. So we would use this Fast Company ad, Fast Company piece of press as something that people could click on, could learn more about Laurel's, and then could potentially come to our site and then purchase. Dame Products has done that as well. But we've noticed lately that Facebook has stopped allowing that practice as well. So we're trying to link to a piece of press, a piece of news. And Facebook is saying, no, the sexual content of that news article is too inappropriate for our viewers to be looking at. I mean, to me, that's just really next level in a really problematic way.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. Yarlap, we are FDA cleared to treat urinary incontinence. That's our thing, and the sex part is a really great bonus to that. And we've actually run into that problem where we've tried to boost posts, and they are like, the sexual content is inappropriate, but the whole thing is talking about Kegels and women's wellness. And it kind of makes you feel that you should be ashamed of wanting to learn about Kegels or learning how to better your pelvic floor muscle tone or your sexual wellness or sexual pleasure. And that's kind of the feeling that we get. And it's really disheartening. I totally agree with everything that Melanie and Erica have said. It's annoying and it's incredibly frustrating.
And it's worth highlighting, by the way, where this ridiculousness comes from. Because to contextualize this, the young white male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate our lives today are not the primary targets, online and offline, of abuse, harassment, sexual assault, violence, rape. Therefore, they do not and did not proactively design for it. And what they are doing now is under the umbrella term compliance, is operating a knee-jerk policy to try and address the fact that they did not put enough thought into what these platforms could and couldn't achieve in a socially beneficial context originally. Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled, we design safe spaces and safe experiences, and we put a lot of thought into how those spaces can actually promote socially beneficial dynamics and community building. I and my team spent literally years concepting and designing Make Love Not Porn before we ever built it, because we knew that if we were going to invite people to do something they've never done before, socially share their real world sex, we had to think through every possible ramification of that to create a completely safe and trustworthy space. As a result, we operate unlike anybody else in the adult sphere and unlike anybody else on the internet, period, not least because I designed Make Love Not Porn around human curation. When you actually put the thought into designing a community, designing platforms that are intended to create safe, open, healthy spaces, then you design in the mechanisms that allow people to have open, healthy conversations around sex. You cannot close the stable door after the horse has bolted by imposing a ton of legislation and regulations that you think are protecting yourselves. And by the way, let's be clear about it. None of this compliance is designed to protect people. It's designed to protect the platform itself. You can't do that after the event.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. The compliance angle is what drives it. It's more of a reactionary thing than it is a proactive decision-making process on the part of most of these ad venues that are turning you guys down. There's something that keeps coming up. It seems like if I'm reading and hearing you right, what it comes down to is PR is the fallback position. I mean, it's where everybody needs to go in order to get promotion out there about the product because ad venues are shut down. But are there any other advertising vehicles that you can use? I mean, is anybody using direct mail? Are you using email, etc.?
Actually, you've missed out search, Bob.
Oh yeah, of course, the inbound search. That's absolutely an important part.
So the two things that have driven growth organically for Make Love Not Porn in the years where we were bootstrapping without any funds for any kind of paid for promotional marketing have been media coverage, absolutely. As I think we'd all attest, the one benefit of having a controversial venture is that you do get ongoing media coverage all the time, in our case, without ever doing, proactive PR outreach. But the other thing that has driven a lot of traffic for us is search. And kind of not exactly originally, intentionally, but the fact that when I started Make Love Not Porn 10 years ago, I just went, encountered this issue, dating younger men. Boy oh boy, somebody should do something about this. I'm going to put up a porn world versus real world site. I need a URL, something short and punchy and memorable, sums up what we're about. Make Love Not War, Make Love Not Porn. That's about as much thought that went into buying that URL 10 years ago. I did not realize that, I would proceed to own the definitive call to action in my area. Because every day, hundreds of young people, say on social media, make love, not porn, and think they're the very first person ever thought of saying that. But obviously, what that does mean is that we get a ton of traffic through organic search, which is people looking for, not porn, make love, etc. In fact, I said to my team originally at the start of this venture, our marketing strategy ultimately is one thing and one thing only, but it's a very hard thing to achieve. We would love one day to be result one on page one of every single Google search for the word porn. The highest we've gotten is result 25 on page 3, without doing any SEO whatsoever. There are porn companies that would kill for that positioning. Now that we do have the funds, we are working with a wonderful SEO company called The Content Factory, which I believe also works with Gallop. Is that right, Maryellen?
Yeah, with Carrie.
Yep. We love The Content Factory, and so actually, search, both organic search and paid search, is a terrific dynamic to have when you are having to come up with very creative and innovative ways of getting around the advertising barriers that we all face.
And which leads me to my next question, which is which do you place more focus on, guys, on terms of your marketing? Is it growing existing, accepting customers, or is it expanding prospecting efforts beyond those actively seeking products like yours? I mean, Melanie, which would be your primary focus when you're going out into the marketing arena, just from the standpoint of limited resources and no ability to go wide with your advertising? Do you focus more on your existing lists and your existing customer base, or do you go out and try to find new customers constantly?
Well, we do focus on both. I would say that right now we're primarily focused on expanding knowledge of the brand and finding new customers. But then we're also adding significantly to our content marketing strategy and our email marketing strategy, basically to remind our current customers and future customers that oral sex is amazing and you want to be having more of it. We are using those content marketing strategies to really, remind our customers to, reach into their bedside table and pull out some laurels and have a really wonderful night tonight. But then also, it's been very important to reach out and find new customers. And we're doing that also through search. We're doing that through organic social media, as well as podcast advertising has been very effective for us. And then we also do digital ads as well on a variety of different sites.
How about influencers? How important is the influencer marketing, Erica, in terms of your strategy going forward? It seems like everybody in this industry, as far as I can see, is actively pursuing influencers on a consistent basis.
Totally. I was actually just going to bring that up because it's been super effective for us. Just investing in relationships with bigger, or perhaps I shouldn't say bigger, more mainstream influencers. We've partnered with the Standard Hotel, Goop. We've partnered with Instagram influencers, and it really adds a lot of followers, awareness. It brings in new customers. We see spikes whenever we're mentioned by one of these influencers. So that has been pretty much equally great for us, in addition to, of course, email and search, which I agree has been great as well.
And Maryellen, I know that when I met you last year and we had our brief conversation, you talked a lot about your influencer strategy that you were putting in play for Yarlap.
Yeah, basically like ditto with what Erica just said. Influencers kind of give a very personal touch of their own experience, and their audience trusts them. So whenever we get mentioned by an influencer, we do see a spike in the people that come in, which is fantastic. And I think that the influencer market definitely helps, because I feel like they can kind of pick and choose who they talk about and who they talk with. And so when you find somebody who's a really good fit, you never run into that like, oh, well, this is inappropriate. No, they're like, yes, let's talk about this taboo subject and let me bring it to my audience. And because of that, that really helps you out, and it gives that personal touch, especially, when it comes to sexual pleasure or things, like peeing yourself. When you have an influencer who goes, hey, you're not alone in this issue, people really kind of gravitate towards that.
And in terms of the influencer strategy that any of you are putting in place, is anybody paying for influencer endorsements, or are most of you just shipping free product out to people and, getting honest reviews? I mean, which is the better strategy for you, Cindy, in terms of the way you do this?
We are obviously very interested in finding the right influencers. At the same time, we don't have the budget to be able to pay substantially. So we really try and find people, especially through our media coverage, who are willing to engage and promote us to their followers. But we are actually at the moment looking at a number of the different benefits that we deliver to our members, and looking at how we can extrapolate that into an influencer strategy that is about make love not porn early adopters in different categories. But because we hear, for example, we hear from people who have had issues with their sexuality and sex life post cancer. And found us enormously helpful. We hear from people who tell us that we've enabled them to reclaim their sexuality post abuse and sexual assault. We hear from parents who tell us that we've helped them become a lot more open in kind of educating their children around sex. And so we are in the process of thinking, who would be influencers in each of these areas where we deliver a very real benefit, and we can find someone who would want to talk about that openly and promote us. But again, with the consideration that we don't have big budgets to throw around.
Yeah, it seems to be the norm that the money is not there, except for big product companies. I assume that some of the big product companies are able to spend a little bit more cash than the startups would be.
We never invested with payment in influencer marketing because I also just don't think it's effective.
Wow, that's
when
interesting.
Influencers post and they have to write sponsored content. I mean, who does that really influence? So I think it's definitely about investing in building relationships and finding, like Cindy said, the right influencers who are a natural fit, who would just want to promote your business and want to work with you.
Well, speaking of something that Cindy said, we've got the elephant in the room to cover, sexism in the business. Sex-related industries are dominated by male-run companies, and most of the dollars go towards satisfying male desires. Yet, judging by my own research and the makeup of this panel, most of the really cool innovations are happening in the female-led startups and oriented toward feminine pleasure and sensibilities. Melanie, we can all guess why this is happening, but what will it take to change the dynamic? What will it take to let the female-led startups take a front seat here at the meeting and make sure that people are taking female-led startups and feminine products a little bit more seriously? Is it just opening up the marketplace and showing the money, or is there something more that needs to happen?
Well, I would say that, the largest pockets, the largest amount of money that exists for this or any other industry is within the hands of white cisgender men. Men are the ones who have a lot of power when it comes to investing in this space. And I think that probably a lot of female entrepreneurs in this area have either received investment from male investors or have gotten very close to receiving investment from male investors. And I think that that's a great thing. I certainly would. I think that there might be a little bit of stigma in some areas of receiving money from male investors for female created products. But
wait a minute.
I think that's not really the way to go.
There's a stigma in accepting money from men for feminine products. Is that really a thing?
I think a lot of us would love to say that we are we have a 100% female investment team, but that is just simply not a reality. And then also, in doing something like that, we are really ignoring the voices of a lot of our potential customers. For Laurel's, nearly half of our customers are men. And I think that a lot of male investors, when they initially hear about Laurel's, and not just investors, but also potential customers, potential stakeholders, they immediately see the problem. They immediately say, oh my gosh, yes, my girlfriend or my wife says no all the time. And it makes me so sad because I want to be performing oral sex for her. And I think that this is a problem that not just women, but men as well recognize. So I really think that it is pushing through that taboo that both male and female investors seem to feel with investing in sex tech. And I think that essentially, all of these investors can make a huge difference in the makeup of the gender of entrepreneurs who are bringing these products to market, in the makeup of the products themselves, and the diversity that we're seeing in these products by just breaking past that taboo and deciding that they're not going to care what their, business colleagues think of them. They're not going to care about, being at cocktail parties and talking about something that's a little bit taboo and that's a little bit stigmatized. Instead, they're going to go where the money is, which is into these sex tech industries.
I'm recalling an incident that happened back in January right now, which was the CES conference, which the year before had made such a big deal about sex robots. But then this year, shut out. I forget. Maybe Cindy, you can.
It was Laura DiCarlo.
Yeah, it shut out the opportunity for a product that was designed for female enjoyment, and said that you can't show your products on our show floor. That caused a big uproar, and as a result, this year CES is going to have a special area for sex technology. I'm assuming for any kind of sex techs to show up. But is that really changing anything, Cindy? I mean, is that really a signal of change in the industry, or is that more appeasement?
No, it's not a signal of change at all, because last year I applied to CES to speak because there'd been a huge kerfuffle about the dominance of men on their keynote stage. I applied to speak about sex tech. They turned me down. So when they announced that they were going to, and by the way, what they've said is this is an experiment. This year, they're going to, tentatively open CS up to sex tech and see what happens. So I very publicly announced on social media that I was delighted to hear this. I was going to reapply to give a keynote on sex tech. I reapplied, and they responded to me and said, "Oh no, actually, we're not incorporating sex tech in our program, so no, I'm afraid we can't have you speak." So, so no, nothing's changed there, and that's why, because I want to go back to your earlier question, well, about what will change the pattern of investment in this category. What will change it is what I'm doing. Because I realized, given my enormous challenges raising funding for Make Love Not Porn, that I was going to have to do what I tell other entrepreneurs to do, which is when you have a truly world-changing startup, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And because I spectacularly failed for a number of years to raise just $2 million to scale Make Love Not Porn, I decided, seemingly counterintuitively, to raise $200 million to start the world's first and only sex tech fund. Because if nobody else is going to do it, then I will. If this is what it takes, in order to get my own startup funded, I'm just going to have to get the entire category funded. So I am actively working to raise $200 million for my sex tech fund. The name of my fund derives from a quote by Chairman Mao, who famously said many years ago, in the interest of gender equality, "Women hold up half the sky." I think that's relatively unambitious. My sex tech fund is called All the Sky Holdings. You can find it at alltheskyholdings.com. And I have a dual investment thesis. I want to invest in what we're all talking about here today, which is radically innovative sex tech ventures with a focus, not exclusively, but primarily on those that are founded by women. But the second thing I want to invest in is every single business obstacle that every one of us encounters every day is a huge disruptive business opportunity in itself. I want to fund the infrastructure of sex tech, what I'm calling the sex tech full stack, because the first payment processor that embraces legal, ethical, transparent sex tech ventures like ours cleans up. The first hosting provider, the first e-commerce platform. I want to fund the ecosystem of sex tech to do three things. A, to create a self-sustaining portfolio for All the Sky, because any venture I fund will need this. B, to be a bloody huge revenue generator, because every single sex tech venture all around the world and the entire adult industry needs this. And C, and I use a Peter Thiel term here deliberately, to monopolistically build out and own the entire underlying ecosystem to turn sex tech into the next trillion-dollar category in tech.
And that sounds wonderful. I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity for investment to come into the space. What about from the standpoint of the problem between The problem of male sexual products being so not only accepted by investors but so willingly embraced by a male audience, so that so much of the money generated by the sex toy industry tends to go toward male buyers, when there's so much opportunity with the women's market. And what I'm trying to ask basically is it the ignorance of men, or is it the unwillingness of women to embrace these types of products? I mean, which is the bigger problem that you face, Erica, when you're bringing a new product into the marketplace? Is it the fact that men are not willing to accept that women are sexual beings, or is it more that women are not willing to accept that they are sexual beings?
I would say it's 90% the former, unfortunately. I think that, there's still it's still a taboo subject, and a lot of women have internalized that. But I think at this point in time, women are really taking their pleasure. It's empowering. I think it's the right time for women to be much more accepting, and you can see this, especially with the younger generations, millennials, definitely Gen Z coming up. So I do think it's because mostly men control the money in funding, in companies. So I think once we have more women in decision-making positions, that's when things will quickly change.
I also think that we, as a society, need to start acknowledging that sex is about pleasure. Sex is not always about procreation. In fact, a very, very small percentage of the sex that is had is about procreation. Yet we are so much more comfortable with these erectile dysfunction drugs and drugs that allow and help men ejaculate. Because I think deep down we say, oh, well, it's okay because it's helping, a child to get brought into the world. But we're just lying to ourselves when we say that. I mean, the reality is that sex is about having fun. It's about connecting with another person. It's about creating passion, creating love, creating an emotional connection. And when we can start acknowledging that, then we can also start recognizing that women deserve pleasure during sex. It doesn't automatically come as naturally for us as it does for a lot of men. And so many of the products that are being created right now are being created for the purpose of women experiencing pleasure while they're having sex. And really, we are entitled to that just as men are.
That's a perfect. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just? What this boils down to is precisely what Make Love Not Porn's mission is, which is to make it easier for every single person in the world to talk openly and honestly about sex. And while Make Love Not Porn was an accident, what is no accident is that my background is 35 years working in advertising. I've spent 35 years working in the business of communication. I know, therefore, that everything great in life and business is born out of great communication. Sex is no different. Great sex is born out of great communication. And the reason why, this is so much our single-minded mission to Make Love Not Porn, to make it easier to talk about sex, is because you can design the most cutting-edge sex toy in the entire universe. You can design the most amazing, helpful sex tech products. If a couple cannot bring themselves to talk to each other about their sex life, they're never going to buy and use them. And so making it easier for people to talk about sex, socializing sex, is the first barrier that has to be broken down in order to sell everything that we're all talking about.
All this conversation is a perfect segue into our final topic. It's about, there's this debate going on about whether or not sex tech is about sex robots and this kind of depersonalization of sex versus this connection. I mean, I found literally dozens and dozens of recent articles on the subject of sex robots, along with stories about AI sex, VR sex, and digisexuals. I've never heard this term digisexual, but those who choose only to have sex digitally. But underlying all this is there's this real split in the sector about using technology to encourage this greater connection, which is what you guys seem to be talking about, and those catering to the trend toward isolation and fear of intimacy. So, Erica, which is the dominant future? I mean, is this perception that you're trying to, that I hear from every one of you that you're all about trying to connect people and you're trying to bring greater intimacy. Is that the future? Is that going to win out? Or is the dominant future this digisexual future where people are disconnected and only really having sex via distance and via devices?
Right. I think this is such a fascinating topic. When I did a bit of brushing up on the latest developments, my favorite quote that I found on the topic was on Reddit. It said, "These dystopian scenarios focusing on the downsides really don't consider the upsides. What if sex bots enhance my relationship with my hand rather than destroy it?" And I really think, right, it's funny, but I also feel like, a lot of catastrophizing when we talk about sex robots is kind of the dominant way it's being covered. But with sex robots, we have a really long way to go to potentially make them feasible as something more mainstream. It's too fringe. I don't know that it's going to change within the next decade.
But think beyond think beyond sex robots. I mean, there's this term. A friend of mine came up with this term. I'm not sure if it's actually a word in the industry, but he called it teledildonics. This idea that you're somehow.
Yeah, no, it's a very common term. It's used as part of sex tech.
Yeah, this whole idea of teledildonics, where it's just like somebody is on the other end of a Skype connection with some kind of device that is one sexual device, and it reacts to the sexual device that you have on your end of the connection, and that's an intimate relationship, even though it's digital, but it's still not really intimate because it's disconnected from that other human being, and that future seems to be right here, right now.
Actually, Bob, what you're talking about is a function of sexism. Because just as the tech industry is male-dominated, so are the people who cover tech in the media. And the reason you see a proliferation of coverage about sex robots is because it's a lot more comfortable for the men who are writing about sex tech to write about that side of sex tech that they can really geek out on, which is the hardware. Which is why all the coverage is teledildonics, sex robots, VR porn. It's a lot more uncomfortable to write about the area of tech that we're all working in, which you could call the software, which is about people actually having sex with each other. As a result, all of the coverage, promotion, awareness, and therefore funding goes to that side of sex tech, which is all about driving us further and further apart from each other into our own little virtual worlds, versus the side that you have quite rightly observed we all work on, which is about using technology to bring people together in the real world. And I think we all know which is more important for the future of humanity. And I know we are all equally driven to make the future that we want to see be the future of mankind. And, I'm often asked by journalists in interviews, "So, Cindy, when do you think all of this will change? When do you think we'll be less repressed about sex?" And I make the point, don't ask that question in the passive tense. All of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change, and I don't wait for things to change. I make them change.
Great points. Erica, you were trying to say something too?
Yeah, I actually think instead of sex robots, the future of AI might be something that millennials and Gen Z are already kind of integrating in their communication with sex and dating. And I think that's apps is the future of not digisexuals, but of AI sex. Basically sex bots that you chat with. And I see this in our industry as well. Brianna Rader's company, Juicebox, they have basically bots that you can text for sex education questions. Pornhub has sex bots that you can, it's basically like phone operators, but it's bots, and it's very popular. Even Real Doll, the company behind Real Doll has a newer app that lets you chat with a sex bot, basically. But I don't see this really taking away from, our social connection. At the end of the day, we all need to connect as humans. It's a fundamental need. It's not going anywhere. kind of like the internet has opened new avenues for connection, that we never had before, but we still have relationships, we still have friendships. I don't know that this will ever change.
Maryellen, I want to ask one last question about this. From your perspective, does all this conversation about digisexuals and sex robots and everything help or hurt a device like yours, which is ultimately about female wellness and potentially some kind of connection with your mate? I mean, it seems like it's such an intimate product, and it's so much about making your life better. Is all this talk about sex and AI and chatbots and everything else, does that make your job harder in getting any kind of coverage or getting any kind of traction for your product in the marketplace?
No, but I was actually going to answer the last part.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah. Is that I don't think that I think that we're compartmentalizing it when it comes to like sex text, digitext, and all these things. But when it boils down to everything, it's all about empowerment and making you feel good about yourself, and you're not stigmatized, you're not embarrassed about something that makes you feel good. Like take what we're doing with Yarlap is a lot of people feel really isolated because they're peeing themselves and they're not having a strong orgasm. And then you're giving them a tool, you're giving them a sex tech product to help better their health. And I think that, and continuing on into the next question, it doesn't really hurt us when people start talking about sex robots, sex digisex or digidildos. It doesn't affect us because what it comes down to is making sure that everybody feels good and empowered and we're not embarrassed about this. And I think that every single one of us here on this panel, what we run into every single day is that journalists and everybody asks us questions about, how do you get around the embarrassment? How do you think that this is going to change? And I think that when it comes down to it, it will change when we stop getting embarrassed, when we stop flinching, or we get that weird sensation of, oh, I don't think that I should talk about this at the dinner table. There is absolutely nothing wrong with talking about sex, what makes you feel good, and what you like. And I think that once we get to a point where we can openly talk about our sexual pleasure and our sexual wellness, then we're going to be in a really, really great place. But for devices like Yarlap, talking about these things doesn't help or doesn't hurt us. It actually kind of helps us because it opens up that avenue. It opens up this conversation that some people aren't willing to have. And for instance, a while back, playing off of what Erica had said earlier, a while back, we actually had a producer who didn't want to talk to us because she said that the issue was that women didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to talk about the pelvic floor because it was too intimate and it was too private. They just did not want to talk about it. They don't want to do that. And being on the ground, talking to women every single day, that's not true. Women want to have the resources. They want to have the tools. They want to have some place to go that they can openly talk and ask questions and learn things as facts, not, like myths or anything like that, but have a really good educational platform that is good and educational for them, that doesn't make them feel alone. And I think that once we're able to bring that, and what we're all doing here with, all of our designs here today, is that we're opening up that conversation. And I think that the future, or what we're trying to create now, is a open platform where women aren't embarrassed about something that we've been told to be embarrassed about for so long. There's no shame that should be associated with any of this whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's a good place.
As I stand on my soapbox, but I think that we've been told for so long that we should be ashamed, or we should not be talking about it. Women, for so long, people would be like, oh, does the female orgasm exist? And at a certain point, I just want to be like, you know what? If you ask that question as a joke, leave the room. I don't want to have this conversation. You know what I mean? And I think that it's really important that, we don't say, oh, digisex, virtual porn, what have you, is separate. It's all together. It all makes us feel really good. There's no, sex is part of your wellness. It's part of your overall health. Take your pelvic floor, for instance. I know I keep coming back to that, but that's my bread and butter. Some people who have a weakened pelvic floor, they might not have a strong response to the orgasm because the same muscles that contract during pelvic floor exercises, Kegels, are the same ones that contract during orgasm. And so we have people who have really strong orgasms once they've gotten a stronger pelvic floor, and that integrates with sexual pleasure, that integrates with your pelvic health, that it integrates with every single part. Sex is not different than wellness. It's not different than health. It's all part of being.
And that leads us to a perfect place to break off. It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again for an incredible conversation and allow them to each do a shameless plug for themselves, starting with Erica Braverman. Erica, I'm not your PR firm is so new. I'm not sure if you have a website yet, but tell us, where can we find you and what would you like to promote?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at Erica Braverman, or on Twitter with the same handle, or via email, ebraverman10@gmail.com. I'm happy to give that out. If you're looking for PR services in sexual wellness, it's really my passion. So please reach out to me.
And you're representing the Sex Expo here in Brooklyn. Is that true? Or
I am, and I love that show. I'm so excited to be running PR for the show this year.
Oh, great. And we're there, Erica. We'll be there.
Oh, yay. That's
we've
exciting.
Taken a stand.
I'm sorry?
And we've taken a booth at Sex Expo.
Fabulous. Oh, I'm excited.
Laurels will be there too. It'll be a big reunion from this podcast.
It will be a big reunion.
Yes, that's awesome. And Bob, you're attending as well, correct?
I am going to be there. So that's fantastic. Great to meet you.
I need to get Yarlap on this. Just have like a little reunion.
Yeah.
Well, next up, Melanie Cristol. You can find her at mylaurels.com. The website will be on the show page. So tell us, Melanie, what would you like to promote? What would you like to tell us all about?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to promote Laurels as a way to have more intimacy with your partner, to be able to connect on a new level, to be able to experience the joy and sensation and fun of oral sex whenever you're interested in it. So yeah, you can go to our website, mylaurels.com, MYLORALS.com, and you can get 15% off with the code BeanCast.
Oh, wow. I got a code.
You get a code. Yay.
Fantastic. Now, Cindy Gallop, you can find her and her wonderful site at makelovenotporn.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Cindy. What would you like to promote?
Sure. Well, obviously, I'd love everyone to go to Make Love Not Porn and take out a subscription. You can also find our manifesto at socialsexrevolution.com. Look out for us on Sunday, September 29th at 10 o'clock on CNN. We are in the season premiere of the new series of This Is Life with Lisa Ling. So we're very excited about that. And I will be speaking at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco on October 3rd on a panel called How to Build a Sex Tech Startup, with Cyan Bannister of Founders Fund, and with the brilliant female founder we were talking about earlier, Laura Haddock of Laura DiCarlo. So anybody who's in San Francisco, do come along to that panel, because I think that's going to be a lot of fun. That
sounds like a great one. That sounds really great. Finally, Maryellen Reider, you can find her at yarlap.com. That's YARLAP. Tell us what's going on in your world, Maryellen.
Yeah, so if any woman out there feels like they want to tone their pelvic floor muscles, whether you laugh, sneeze, cough, and you pee yourself a little bit, or you want to prevent that, or you want to have the Kegels done automatically for you, check us out at Yarlap, and you can use the code BEAN for $30 off and free shipping within the United States.
Look at that. I got a second code as well. That's fantastic. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time not to talk about sex. It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Amazon is promoting the launch of season 2 of Jack Ryan with a 50,000 square foot light up rooftop ad on the approach to LAX. Erica, I don't know about you, but I suppose you fly into LAX. I don't know if you've seen this particular display, but this is the most massive, amazing thing I've seen in quite some time. It's pretty spectacular in terms of the raw square footage and the effort here in terms of creativity.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of out-of-home ads. A lot of the products and shows that I discover nowadays are billboards and installations like this. I think as we get more cluttered in terms of people being able to fast forward through commercials and the excess of noise, I think out of home is definitely a huge frontier for marketing right now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's Rashad Tabakawala has said that outdoor is probably the last great mass media after TV starts to go more towards streaming. So it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. Now for the bad of the week, and I'm going to go to Cindy on this one. This is right up your alley, Cindy. The UK's Ministry of Treasury decided to allay fears about a no-deal Brexit by promoting the fact that it would bring back duty-free shopping on European products. The backlash has been scathing on social media. I mean, I can't believe that they thought this was a good idea to promote Brexit with this particular benefit.
Well, quite frankly, Bob, I mean, who thought it was a good idea to promote Brexit, period? Honestly, I am just embarrassed by my home country, and it's unbelievably mortifying to see what's going on there right now. And yeah, I mean, really, what can one say? It's all just one gigantic mess with no very clear way through. So nothing unfortunately surprises me anymore about all of that.
And last but not least, the ugly of the week. Waze has been revolutionary for drivers of all kinds to save time and avoid traffic bottlenecks. Unfortunately, Melanie, the Google-owned company is being exposed to a nice PR backlash now, as many LA residents have begun to cry foul over them funneling more and more highway traffic through residential neighborhoods. I think this is hysterical when you think about it, but it's just a pain in the butt for so many of these residents who are having to deal with people speeding through their neighborhoods like it's the highway.
That's true. Although, as somebody who certainly benefits from Waze and from Google Maps, I'm so grateful to be able to get around that traffic. I mean, we are all trying to live an as easy as possible life in a very condensed city. And, those roads are there. And, sometimes they're empty, and sometimes it's a really good way for people to get around, this
I know your pain. I know your pain.
Bottleneck that we often have.
That's why I put it as ugly, because it's just like, it's not exactly wrong, but it's certainly causing them a lot of backlash.
Yes, it is. It is.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag GBU. That's #GBU. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.